And it looks like we are live. The special live edition of the Rice Crypto Show. I appreciate everybody for tuning in. And we will be getting this show started here very shortly. I'm going to let everybody get adjusted in their seats because we're going to have a really awesome conversation today. And we're going to go ahead and kick things off here in just a moment. All right, now before we begin the show, I want to appreciate everybody for tuning in. I want to let everybody know to check out my sister channels on LBRY and Odyssey. That's where you can find me in case my YouTube channel gets deleted. I post up extra videos to encourage people to check out these decentralized content sharing platforms. So you know where you'll also find me. I've got new episodes of Rice Radio also available, so make sure you're checking that out on all major podcasting platforms. It's hosted on anchor.fm. I actually just dropped an episode this morning, a very exclusive conversation with Jeremy Corden, who is the president of Goldback Incorporated. So make sure you guys are checking that out. Also, you can hedge against the US dollar and all this inflation and crazy stuff going on economically around the world. Hedge against the US dollar by buying gold and silver and, of course, cryptocurrencies. Now, if you're interested in buying some gold and silver and you're a first-time buyer at moneymetals.com, if you purchase $100 or more and you use the promo code RICE, R-I-C-E, you'll get a free half ounce of silver. Also, I'm going to be doing a giveaway for Zilliqa today. So make sure you get your Zilliqa address ready, and I'll tell you how you guys can do that here in just a moment. And without further ado, today, I am joined by the man himself, the president, the chief science officer of Zilliqa, Amrit Kumar. Amrit, thanks for coming on the show today. How are you doing? Oh, let me unmute you. My bad. I apologize.
Hi, thank you very much for inviting me over, Chris.
Thank you so much, man. And I'm really looking forward to this conversation. I've been a big fan of what Zilliqa has been doing for quite some time. One of the things that brought me to the attention to my attention to the project was unstoppable domains. I've worked with Brad and done some work with unstoppable domains. I really am impressed with them, and I know that they kind of got their start, I think, through the foundation, if I'm not mistaken. It's been a while since I've looked into that, so that kind of came to me kind of quickly. But how's everything going with you today?
Very well. You know, we are based in, I'm based in London. A big bunch of my team members are based in Singapore. And then as any blockchain platform, we have people sitting all over the world. So we have people in Copenhagen, in Russia, India, China, all over the place, really. And different people are in different state of lockdown in some sense. Singapore, for example, is in a better state compared to, let's say, European countries. So in London, it's a full lockdown, but I'm hoping that things will improve very soon.
Yeah, I've been hearing everything that's going on in the UK and all around the world with lockdowns and stuff. So for everybody out there, just try to stay positive, and hopefully we'll get through this, and we will definitely get through this together, ultimately. So for people who are unfamiliar with you, aside from the fact that you're the president and the chief science officer for Zilliqa, who is Amrit? Who's Amrit Kumar?
Yeah, so, I come from a research background, so I've always been an academic since a long time. I did my bachelor's in India, so I grew up in India. This is where I did my studies there, initial studies. So I did my bachelor's in mathematics there, and then I got a scholarship and moved over to Paris. And it was very strange because the whole program where I was going for, it was a bachelor's in engineering program. It was all in French. And I literally knew nothing in French, about French. So not even a single word. So that was kind of a very strange experience. So I went there with some of my friends from my university. And then we went into, they have a language sort of internship program. So they take you for 3 months. And from 8 in the morning until 5 p.m., you actually go through a rigorous language learning program for 3 months.
Right.
So this prepares you for French courses. And after that, we join actual academic courses. And so I stayed in France for roughly beginning for 3 years, 4 years. This is when I finished my engineering. Then I decided to stay a bit longer, and then decided to do my PhD near the Alps. So I'm not a skier, but for those who want to go for ski, that's really the place to go for. Just near the intersection of Italy, Switzerland, and France. That's the best spot.
It sounds like it'd be a beautiful place to check out. I've never been outside the United States, and hopefully that will change soon.
Yeah, so that was kind of the place where I was. So I finished my PhD, and then this was kind of the time when blockchains was being picked up by the researchers. So until then, it was mostly for trading, and people were enthusiastic about what Bitcoin could do and blockchains could do in general. But researchers were still very skeptical about it because they wanted to understand the real potential behind this from a technical perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So they wanted to go beyond the hype. And after, let's say, 3 or 4 years, people realized that there's some real potential from a research angle in blockchains and Bitcoin in particular. And this was when I was just finishing my PhD, and I was thinking about what to do next after my PhD. And so I moved over to, I was looking for opportunities in blockchain space, especially from the research angle, to understand what are the research problems that we could tackle in the blockchain space. And this is how I ended up in Singapore, where I started to work with a faculty member at National University of Singapore, which is one of the leading universities in Singapore in the world as well. And this is where I started my blockchain journey. So my first sort of venture into blockchains was through Monero, which is privacy. I mean, it was around that time when Monero Dash and Zcash were becoming popular.
I'm a huge Monero fan, so it's cool.
Yeah, so I mean, I liked Monero back then because I really felt that it had simplicity compared to Zcash. It has a much simpler crypto primitives, and so it was much easier to understand what was going on with this. So we worked on me and some of my colleagues at the university. We started to look into Monero to understand what sort of privacy you get in practice, compared with what is sort of proposed in theory, in some sense.
Right.
The difference between that. And because in the end, we realized that privacy depends on how people use it. So if you give a tool to people, it depends on how people use that tool to protect their privacy. And that sometimes may actually impact everybody else's privacy as well. So that was kind of, we went through that research work. And, at the end of that research, my advisor came to me and said, we have been working on the scalability of blockchains. And would you be interested in working on that project as well? I said, sure. And this is how I got involved into Zilliqa. So Monero was my first interest, and then I started to read Bitcoin's white paper. So it was the other way around.
Okay. That's an interesting way of going about it, starting in the privacy sector and then going into the public blockchains, which is an interesting way of going about it, but it gives a little bit of an indication of like what's important to you. And, privacy is a very important thing that people should be focusing on, especially when it comes to money. I think that, if people realized, especially if we go towards a cashless society and all digital, where people are going to completely lose all their privacy. It's crazy to think about when you think about it. So,
and the important thing is that in this case, in the blockchain space, you control all of that information, right? So it's also very risky sometimes. So it's not that as in the case of banks where something goes off, then the bank may come and save you. That's
right.
That's not going to happen in the blockchain space. You have to be very careful with the data that you hold and that you own.
I'm glad that you said it like that too, because the big motto in the space is be your own bank, but people don't really talk about when you are your own bank, you have to be completely responsible for what you do. And a lot of people, especially in the United States, being that there's banks everywhere, and most people now aren't even using checkbooks to do balancing. They're just looking at their application and seeing what their balance is. They're not really keeping track of it. So it's crazy how that's changed a lot. And it's really awesome what cryptocurrency and blockchain are being able to allow us to do, and to change the ideas of what people think of as money and currency as well. So now when I think about Zilliqa, I always think of, for some reason, I always think about Godzilla. I have seen a lot of people posting things like Zilliqa, which I think is really cool. Zilliqa is a really cool project. It's a high performance, high security blockchain committed to delivering a scalable and secure platform for developers and enterprises that want to build decentralized applications. The mainnet went live in January of 2019. It's the first public blockchain to utilize sharding as a scaling solution, which allows for scaling in a linear fashion. Can you describe, aside from what I said, how would you give the elevator pitch to what Zilliqa is to somebody who's unfamiliar?
Sure. So if you look at the state-of-the-art blockchains, which in some sense, narrow sense of it, boils down to Ethereum and Bitcoin. If you look at them, the number of transactions that they can process is something around 5 to 10 transactions per second. And compare this with, let's say, a real-world application like people often cite this application. So I'm this use case. So I'm not the only one doing this.
Right.
So if you look at, for example, the most popular application, which is payments through your credit card or Visa or MasterCard, for example, they process something between 5,000 to 8,000 transactions per second. And so if the vision of blockchain is to be able to somehow bring, not necessarily Bitcoin and Ethereum or Zilliqa because they're volatile currency, but if the idea is to be able to provide a platform on which you can build next generation, let's say, financial applications, then 5 transactions per second is not going to do much, and it's not going to take you too far. And so the problem that we wanted to solve with Zilliqa was one, to be able to solve this problem. So build a platform where you can run applications that require and that can that require a certain high volume of transaction, and the platform can support that volume. So that's one aspect. The second aspect is about security. So we have seen, especially in case of Ethereum, for those who are familiar in the space, we have seen a lot of incidents happen in the past. The most famous one was the DAO incident, where attackers and hackers were able to steal money from a contract. And as a result, you had Ethereum and Ethereum Classic that the community basically forked in some sense.
Yeah, that was a lot of people aren't really aware of what took place, but that really wasn't a very ethical thing to do in the crypto blockchain space, to kind of roll back a blockchain to act like an incident didn't take place because somebody made a mistake and didn't audit the code correctly.
Yeah, I mean, it was a very debatable moment, and then people realized that was. I mean, at that point of time, people realized that it's not going to be the only incident that's going to happen. And I think since then, things have changed in the community. People have realized that mistakes happen and you have to live with it. And very soon after that, I think parity happened a couple of years later. Mm-hmm. And it was, again, a much larger, I think, if I recall correctly, it was a much larger amount of, I think, $300 worth of Ether were locked because of a parity bug. So parity was a contract.
It was quite a good amount.
Yeah, it was around the ICO period when ICO was very, very popular. And actually, parity was providing a multi-sig wallet that many of these ICO players, including I think back then Polkadot, was using very heavily parity to store their Ether, and they had a huge impact back then. And again, that was not the only incident. A bunch of other hacks have happened over the last 2.5 years. So we also felt that you can't have a system, you can't have a platform where you can allow these things to happen. So you should provide a platform that's safe enough for people to build applications. So from that angle, we also designed and defined a new smart contract language that we call Zilla, which is designed with safety in mind and also allows people to prove certain mathematical properties of the program. So for example, let's say if you have a contract and that contract holds some money, then you should be able to say with mathematical guarantee, that program is not going to leak funds to some other program or some other user. And that's a very strong guarantee that you would want from a contract that potentially can handle hundreds of millions of worth of assets. Mm-hmm. So from Zilliqa's perspective, these are two basically main selling points. One is providing a platform that can handle a high amount of transaction volume. And number two is to provide a safe language in which developers can write their programs and apps.
And you said the programming language is called Zilla?
It's called Zilla, Scilla.
Okay, cool. That's very cool. I didn't know that there was a custom programming language. It's really interesting. And so we don't have to really spend a lot of time on this because this is stuff I know that you've covered and some people may be familiar. We will touch on a lot of the DeFi aspects, which I know a lot of people are really excited about. But for people who are unfamiliar with sharding, being that you're the first public blockchain to utilize sharding as a scaling solution, can you explain in the best way possible what sharding actually is?
Right. So imagine, for example, the way the networks like Bitcoin or non-sharding networks like Bitcoin, Ethereum, they work is that you as a user, let's say I'm sending money to you, Chris. I will prepare a transaction. I will sign it and say, okay, here's my authorization, and I allow the network to take my funds and transfer it to Chris. What happens after that is the network takes this transaction and then processes that. And if, let's say, the network has 10,000 nodes, then each one of them will process that transaction. So each one of them will verify whether the transaction is valid. I'm not trying to do double spend and so on.
Okay.
So it's very secure, very decentralized, because even if, let's say, 10 of those nodes go down, there will always be enough nodes to handle your transaction. Okay. So it's very safe and very secure. But it's also somewhat wasteful, in the sense that imagine you send a $10 transaction and 10,000 nodes in the network process the same transaction. So it's not very, I would say, it's not very efficient in some sense. And this is where the idea of sharding comes in. So sharding basically says that you don't have to have a network that processes every single transaction. Instead, you can divide that network into smaller groups such that each group will process a subset of the transactions. So for example, let's say when I send my transactions, then the first subgroup will process my transactions. And if you send your transaction, it will be processed by a second group. And those two transactions can be handled in parallel. And that's powerful, because then you have more of these sort of shards, the more transactions you can process. And that's what linear scalability is. So the more shards you have, the more throughput you will get in the end. And that's at a very high level what sharding is.
That's very cool. And I mean, I've heard of sharding being used like for storing files and things like that, where it would be, I describe it to people as being like a piece of paper that you rip in multiple pieces and you just give a different piece to a different person. And when you need that whole piece of paper back, you just recall those people that you gave those pieces to, and then you can reformulate that document or whatever it is that you decide to break up, which is a really cool technology. So the sharding, if I'm not mistaken, with the Zilliqa improvement protocol, the ZIP 11, the non-custodial staking, did that just go live on the 14th of this year?
Yes. So Zilliqa's network is a little bit different from Ethereum's network in the sense that we have nodes which process and validate transactions. And then we have a separate network, I won't call it network, but separate set of nodes that we call seed nodes, which are basically nodes that archive data. So let's say when you send transaction, that transaction doesn't get stored everywhere. So it basically gets stored away and processed and handled by a certain set of nodes that we call seed nodes.
Okay.
And these are, so if those who are familiar with Ethereum, these nodes are very similar to Infura that you might hear in the Ethereum space. And Infura nodes also allow you to connect to the network. So let's say when you want to prepare a transaction and you want to send that transaction to the network, that transaction could potentially go through Infura nodes. So Infura becomes basically a gateway, an entry point to the network for you. So these seed nodes also provide that entry point to the Zilliqa network. And what we felt was that this set of network was not incentivized to store these transactions. Why would, for example, I, who has been tasked to store the transaction history, why would I do that? Unless there's an incentive for me to do that. And so the people who were actually storing these transaction history were mostly exchanges, because they wanted an entry point to the network because they wanted to be safe and secure. Explorer service providers, for example, those who wanted to actually show to people and everyone that these are the transactions that the network has processed over time. But beyond that, there was no incentive for anyone to run that. And we felt that we could change that by basically dividing the reward that comes from the mining into two chunks. So 40% of the block rewards would go to the seed node operators and 60% would go to the miners. And what it basically does, it creates an incentivized network for people to actually store the transaction history. Especially, for example, these Explorer service providers, right? Etherscan, in case of Zilliqa, we have ViewBlock, which basically does the same service and provides the same service. They have no incentive. They are doing it for the community, and most of them are being funded by the foundations.
Right.
But we also felt that if we could take a part of the block reward and give that to potentially these service providers, then they have a sustainable revenue source to continue providing this service to the community. And so we implemented this program that we call seed node staking, where the idea is very simple, where people can go and stake with a seed node, and seed node will get reward for storing this transaction history, and basically everyone who has staked with a certain node, with a seed node, will get a part of that reward. And this has become very popular because now it also adds sort of a value for people who are holding on to their Zills, because then they can also stake their Zills and also earn rewards from their Zills. So it has been a very welcome, I would say, much awaited sort of project by the community as well.
That's a good thing. And I mean, you guys have done really well with everything, considering you guys went live with the mainnet in January of 2019. Now we see the non-custodial staking. A lot of projects have been being built on, like you mentioned earlier, unstoppable domains. Revain, which I believe is about reviewing and rating different projects and different kind of like I'm drawing a blank on what it's called, but it's a review application. And then I recently seen, because I've done an interview with Mintables. Mintables NFT marketplace is now live on the Zill blockchain. And you guys have announced a partnership with Switch.io for a decentralized exchange, DEX. You got Next ID, which is a digital certification provider.
That's right.
That's a lot of stuff going on. Is there anything that I didn't include that you'd like to mention before we kind of dive into the DeFi stuff?
Yeah, sure. So there are a few other applications that I would like to mention. One is, given that we are based in Singapore, we are also looking at that market as well. What are the opportunities that market has, and how to tap into that market? One of the areas that we'll be looking into is obviously stablecoins. One, because stablecoin has really driven transaction volumes on different platforms, and there's a real utility. I mean, if you think about really, we can debate all day, about USDT and all that, whether they are backed or not backed. But the fact of the matter is, it's one asset that beyond Bitcoin, Ethereum, and those popular ones, it's one token asset that has really seen adoption in some sense. People are actually using it, at least even for trading. That's still an application in some sense. But there's a demand for that. And so we have also been looking at stable coins, particularly from the Asian market space. So for example, if you look at Indonesia, the market there is very different from the Western world in the US or in Europe, where a lot of people, estimated to be around 60% of people there in that region are either underbanked or unbanked. It basically means that some people in Indonesia, or at least in some cities there, in order for them to get access to a bank account, they have to travel 100 miles.
Right.
Just to get access to a bank, and that's difficult. And what ends up happening in those sort of regions is that there's an alternate sort of system that develops. And I've been reading about a particular startup called PayFast, and what they basically do is they're building sort of an agent-based network that sits between you and your bank. So, for example, let's say if you want to get access to your bank, you don't actually go to your bank, but you go through these sort of middlemen in some sense.
Right.
And they handle deposits and withdrawal on your behalf. But many of these agents do not have the sort of banking license, so they cannot store money for you. So they're not banks per se. So they're only bridge between you and your bank. And this is where stablecoins can potentially become a very interesting asset, because stablecoin, even though it represents money, it's not something, holding it doesn't necessarily require you to have a bank account. And that's very powerful. And so we are looking into that space as well. So we have been working with a company called XFIZ, which is a regulated entity in Singapore. And we are working with them to understand how we can tackle the space in that region, especially from a payments perspective and remittance perspective. Because there's a lot of money flow that happens between Singapore and, let's say, India, or Indonesia, Thailand, and Philippines. Right. And trying to tap into that market from a stablecoin perspective.
That's a smart move. I mean, for people that talk about utilizing cryptocurrencies on a more regular basis, and for people who don't have faith in their fiat currencies, a lot of times you can use these stable coins and be able to get around just like you would be normally. You're not using the dollar bill per se. You're using some sort of other representation that people are accepting. And it's just, when enough people realize that when we start using cryptocurrency, that we're taking the power away from the governments and the central banks that have created this debt-based system, this fractional reserve banking that just ultimately just keeps us indebted. And that's how this whole cycle and whole system works, is just by building and building and building debt. So people just owe and owe and owe, and it's scary, man. It's truly scary.
And that's exactly why you're seeing some interest from people now. There are people who are holding very less of fiat in their banks and converting them into tokenized assets like USDT or USDC. And then they're earning returns from them. In Europe, some of the currencies actually have a negative interest rate. So even if you put that into your bank account, you're actually losing money.
Right.
So there are also incentives and practical incentives for people to get into the blockchain space because it offers efficiencies that traditional markets don't.
Well, I'm looking forward to finding out more news about, you guys doing some work in the stablecoin space, because I think I've also, I'm not sure which country it was. It is an Asian country that has a central bank digital currency, and more people are utilizing that than the actual fiat currency in the nation, which is causing a little bit of a problem, which I found to be very interesting. So there is power in the stablecoins and the CBDCs when it comes to that aspect. Now, going into the DeFi, this is something that really surprised me to hear that you guys were getting into the DeFi game. I'm just, from what I can gather from looking, there is GZIL farming, and I'm assuming GZIL is a governance token. And then we're looking at the launch of ZilSwap, something that people can compare to, like, obviously there's a lot of different decentralized swap exchanges out there that people can utilize. Justin Sun started his Sun Swap, and and then I think you guys are talking about doing a DEX as well. Now, is this DEX the same DEX that you're talking about with Switcheo, or is this
Yes.
a different one? Okay.
It's the same one.
Okay, so can we get into what you guys are doing with ZilSwap and GZIL and yield farming and
Yeah. So there are different projects, right? So GZIL is particularly interesting for me because we have been, when you launch a blockchain, you're starting to launch a blockchain, you're working on it. You don't want, I would say, it's rather difficult for you to get opinions from the community because you're busy, just building stuff. And if you start taking inputs from everyone outside, then reaching consensus is very difficult.
Right.
You don't want to be stopped, and you don't want to be sort of blocked by those initiatives. So far we have been very focused on building on our own without taking too much, I would say, inputs from the community, especially on some of the parameters, right? And but I think we are at a juncture around a year and a half after mainnet launch, where we are at a juncture where we can safely say that we can go and, we have time and energy to go out and reach out to the community and say, okay, can you give us some advice? And what do you think should be let's say, the right inflation that you think would be beneficial for you and for the rest of the ecosystem players, for example, miners? What should be, for example, the block size, for example? There are different parameters that you can get, thoughts from the community on. And so we felt that, okay, how should we actually go about this governance? Asking the community to vote and decide on certain parameters. So incidentally, this was around the same time when we were actually launching our staking, and we felt that staking is a good. I mean, when you're trying to talk about governance, you don't want everyone. You want to capture as much as you can people who are really who really are faithful to your ecosystem, who actually contribute back to your ecosystem, because these are the people who actually understand what's the pros and cons of different components, right?
Right.
Someone who just comes in, a day and says, okay, we are going to change everything that's happening in Zilliqa, that's not going to work, right? So even in traditional systems, like when you bring in a CEO, and if your CEO decides to change everything, then things start to break apart.
Right.
So you need people, those people who are going to govern on certain parameters need to be responsible, need to be able to understand ins and outs of all those matters at hand. But the question was how to capture those people. One way was to, let's say, go and see how many people own GZILs and then decide based on that. But you can say that there are some people who just own Zilliqa tokens, but they don't necessarily sort of do anything beyond that. So I could, for example, go to Binance or one of those exchanges and buy a ton of ZIL tokens, and then I could just sit on top of it and do nothing beyond that. You don't necessarily want to sort of just focus on those people either. So you want to capture people who are actively contributing to the system as well. For example, miners. for example, developers who are actually developing dApps on your platform. And so we felt that the right way to go forward is to somehow attach staking with governance. And so what we felt that maybe what we could do is, instead of, while we are giving the staking rewards, we could also give them some governance tokens. And that governance token would somehow capture how much stake you have put in the system, how long you have been staking, how frequently you're sort of farming your rewards. This also means that you're actually contributing back to the ecosystem, back to the network.
It's kind of a reputation score almost.
Somewhat, because let's say if someone holds a token, and if he holds for a long time, then he should be able to earn more GSELs. If someone who's interacting with the network more frequently, then he should be earning more GSELs. So all of these sort of things had to be captured, and this is what GSEL basically does. So what we did was, for every 1,000 ZIL that you earn as reward, we give you 1 GSEL, and it's automatic. Okay. And so, for example, if let's say if you only stake, let's say 100 ZILs, and if you're stake for long enough, then you at some point of time you'll earn more than 1,000 ZIL, and you will then get one GSEL. And it also means that in order to earn these rewards, you have to manually interact with the network. So you have to send a transaction. So the more frequently you interact with the network, the more GSEL you will get. So it was a very good sort of balance in some way to capture those sort of active people in the network. So that's about staking. And obviously, once you have this GSEL as a token, you potentially needed a way to be able to trade that token in some sense. And that's where ZilSwap came into existence. So we have been working together with Switcho, who decided to build a sort of Uniswap-like exchange. Okay. Where you can create ZILs for GSEL and GSEL for ZILs. There are a bunch of other tokens now. I think there are 15 odd tokens now on ZilSwap. So that's also the first exchange that's driving volume on Zilliqa as well.
So this is already launched? Because I'm looking here.
Yes, okay. It's already launched. It's already live.
October 5th. Okay, cool. Yeah. I wasn't aware. I thought this was actually getting ready to launch. I wasn't aware that this is already out. This is pretty wild.
I think it's around 3-4 weeks now, around a month now, I think.
It's about 2 weeks. Sounds about right. If it was October 5th, you could say it's the 18th. That would be about
around that. Yeah,
still about 2 weeks. Yeah. But then, I mean, it feels like 3 weeks in the crypto space for sure.
Sure.
I would definitely encourage people after we're done with this, I'll include links down below for the Zilliqa website, and as well as for this Cointelegraph article, and so people can follow on Twitter, because there's a lot of information on Twitter as well.
And we also have this Singapore dollar-backed stablecoin, for example, which is also you can buy and sell them on ZilSwap, the exchange that we are talking about. So there are a few other assets like Bolt and a bunch of other assets as well, which are available for people to trade on in this DEX.
Now, ZIL itself, is it an ERC20 token?
It used to be an ERC20 token because around the ICO time when we were doing the fundraise, but just before the mainnet launch around in last year, we swapped the ERC20 tokens with the mainnet ones. So and we basically froze the ERC20 token. So you only can transact on using the mainnet cells on the Zilliqa network now.
Okay, so it's its own separate blockchain, has nothing to do with Ethereum anymore.
No.
Okay, that's awesome to hear. That's awesome. Well, I mean, it sounds really exciting. Now for even myself, for people who want to try to check out the ZilSwap, how can we utilize it? Is it a smartphone application? Is it just something you can get for desktop?
Yeah, so it's a web-based sort of application. So you have to go to your favorite browser, let's say Chrome, for example, and then you type zilswap.io. It takes you to a DEX. You will need a MetaMask-like application that we call the ZilPay, which basically handles your accounts and so on. And you connect them together, and then after that, you're good to go.
Is it Web3, or is it I can do it in Chrome as well, like you were saying?
Yeah, you can do it in Chrome. So it's a Web3 application because it uses it doesn't have any password and those sort of things. So it's
And what did you say the address was?
Zilswap.io.
Okay. I was in my Trust wallet. I was just going to try to open it up real quick and look at it, get a feel for how it is.
So now we are, one of the wallet providers are actually building an in-app sort of DEX as well. So they will connect with ZilSwap. So within the app, you could say.
Takes a minute to focus,
exactly.
But yeah, very cool. I like the interface on it. I love the colors.
It's the Switcho color.
I'm a big fan of colors, and I do like the colors. I like it when a company project has a section for media, so that they can see like the different colors and what sort of numbers it is, so you can find it when you're doing thumbnails and doing artwork and things. I'm big on colors.
We have a press room as well on Zilliqa's website. I think it's hidden somewhere. It's there.
What was that?
We have a press room as well where you can look at logos and color schemes that we're using on our website.
Yeah, that's where I got the it gives a in addition to the like showing the color, it actually gives like a when you're trying to look for a color and you can't find it, there's like a number
that
you can put in it, and yeah, I'm not sure what it is called, but yeah, that's how I was able to look it up. Well, aside from everything that we've just mentioned, and with the DeFi, the yield farming, the governance token, the DEX, everything being done with unstoppable domains, the marketplace with the NFT marketplace. Let me ask you a question about that, because I'm actually going to try to bring on, I forget the guy's name. I think he's in Singapore, the guy from Mentables. Zach, yes. What exactly is the NFTs being built on Zill? Are they Ethereum based? Or,
so they have two versions. So they have two versions, one on Ethereum and one on Zilliqa.
Okay.
So you could, for example, take and issue an NFT on the Zilliqa blockchain, and then go to Mintable to trade them. So Mintable is a marketplace for NFTs, both for Ethereum tokens and ERC-721 and Zilliqa that we call ZRC1.
Okay, so that wasn't something that I was aware of, and I definitely have to talk to Zach about that. So you can build NFTs on Zill.
Yes, you can. I think we have issued a lot of NFTs. In fact, unstoppable domains, in a way, there are also NFTs, because let's say you own chris.zill as your domain name. Mm-hmm. You can represent us as an NFT, and then you can trade them around.
I was kind of figuring that's kind of what it was when I connected it up through Unstoppable Domains, connecting it to my address. I kind of assumed it was like an NFT, because it looks like it would be like an NFT in the wallet.
Yeah, it's not quite that, but you can treat them. You can still treat them somewhat as an NFT, because it still has a value and it's unique in some sense. So
since we're talking about NFTs, and since we're talking about Unstoppable Domains, and since you're the president of Zilliqa, I'm actually going to reach out to Brad, and this was an idea that Ken Bozak had suggested, but creating an NFT receiving address through Unstoppable Domains.
Yeah,
I think that would be a really awesome idea, considering what so far everything that.
I mean, technically, you can send your NFTs to your .zill or .crypto even right now, because in a way, so right now, for example, on your crypto domains, you can send your Zills or Ether. So let's say if you have 5 Zills and you say, I want to send it to chris.zill, then I could do that directly through many of the wallets that we have. You could do the same thing on Ethereum space, in the Ethereum chain as well. And NFTs are again very similar in the sense that they are held by a private key, and that private key could be in a way sort of be interpreted using your crypto domain as well, which could be chris.zill. So it's not very different. So you could do that.
And I do have a .zill. It's ricecrypto.zill, and then I have the ricecrypto.crypto, and I think it was, I'm not sure what they called the thing that they did with it was something with a partnership with Chainlink and attaching the Twitter accounts.
Something between, I can't recall exactly.
So that way that they could verify that they're actually sending to the correct person by seeing their Twitter account, which I thought was a really cool idea. Are there any other projects or anything else coming in the near future you want to touch on?
We are actually, there's a project called Pillar Project, which is, when we launched our governance token, obviously one point was to be able to govern on certain parameters of the protocol. And the second thing was to add some more sort of usage for these GZIL tokens. And one of them is coming up hopefully very soon, at least the announcement and the project details will come up very soon, is around a project called Pillar. And Pillar is very similar to MakerDAO, except that it doesn't have Maker.
Right.
In the sense that it doesn't have the MKR token there. And instead of MKR token, you will have the GZIL token. So you would use GZIL to be able to govern the parameters of this MakerDAO like stablecoin. I just saw a couple of days ago the material that they're going to push in public very soon. So hopefully the community will be able to get a look at it the next.
I was curious what's been going on with Pillar. I saw they redesigned their application, but I really haven't heard much from them.
No, so they did make an announcement, but they have not pushed any sort of proper website that has the details on how this whole thing works and how is it different and so on, how governance token will be used and so on. But it's hopefully it will come out very soon.
Very cool. Well, being that we are at tail end of 2020 and we're getting ready to approach 2021, what can we expect from Zill in the longer term for the next year?
Yeah, there are a lot of things that are happening. Again, it's hard to mention all of them because there's so many things. One, on the protocol side, there are, while many of the other projects are actually building their first version of their blockchains, we have the benefit or advantage that we have actually a version that's running and already running live. So we are in a stage where we are trying to improve the platform from different angles. One, to improve further the number of transactions that the platform can process, reduce the latency in the sense that how much time it takes for a transaction to get processed, and basically improve the platform, optimize the platform from different angles. The second aspect is that we have been working on from a technical perspective is improving dev and general usability. So when a developer comes to a platform and wants to build something, they need all the tools changed. For example, a wallet provider, a wallet that they can easily connect to, an IDE where they can easily write their contract, a testing framework where they can test their contracts, an easy way to be able to deploy their apps and so on. So we have been working for the last, I would say, 6 months to up to a year on developing all these tool chains, especially given that our language is a bit different from Solidity, so we cannot just tap into the tool chains that are available for Solidity developers.
Right.
So there have been a lot of work that has been done on this on usability side and dev tooling side. Beyond that, there are tons of work being done on ecosystem projects. For example, Pillar project that I mentioned is hopefully going to be announced very soon. We have a security token exchange, which is under which has, we applied for the license, we got the license, and now it's under a sandbox sort of environment. It might go live, go out of the sandbox environment hopefully very soon. So that's also very exciting. We are also tokenizing a bunch of other things. So this security exchange was initially designed to start with tokenizing private equities, for example, shares of private companies that are not public yet. But we are also extending that platform to be able to tokenize other assets as well.
Okay.
So that's interesting. We are also closely working on a separate project called Zilliqa Capital, which is an ecosystem fund that will heavily invest in Zilliqa and blockchain system in general in and around Singapore and India. So that's also which is going right now. Hopefully we'll be able to share more information on that very soon.
Well, it's super impressive. The security exchange idea, obviously, I think is something that is going to be needed when you look at all the rehypothecation and stuff that goes on in the traditional markets, and looking for a replacement for those interfaces and being able to allow for more transparency, which I think would be something that people would appreciate, and
liquidity as well. Because if you look at the private equities market, it's very liquid. It's very hard to find someone who holds certain equity and be able to buy from that person. You need to leverage to brokers and so on. And if you had an open market where you could buy and trade those assets, private equities, that could be very powerful from a liquidity perspective.
Awesome. Now, are there any, since you guys had initially used Ethereum and ERC20 token, is there any plans for interoperability or cross-chain action taking place? Because I see a lot of projects trying to build around being a side chain, second layer solution to help Ethereum in its progress. Is that anything that you guys are planning on doing, or is it just you're doing your own ecosystem?
No, we are. So we have started a few weeks ago a project on interoperability, and the idea would be to be able to connect, so build a bridge between Zilliqa and Ethereum, and be able to bring, let's say, assets on Ethereum on top of Zilliqa. So for example, let's say if you like a certain ERC20 token, and you'd like you don't want to spend $10 on fees, then you could potentially bring it back to Zilliqa blockchain and then be able to trade that around at a much cheaper fees. So
Kind
that's
of like
something that
the,
we're sorry.
I'm sorry, would that be kind of like the wrap Bitcoin on Ethereum?
Yeah, it's very sort of similar to wrap Bitcoin model, where you'd be wrapping as one Ethereum, Bitcoin, and potentially ERC20 tokens as well. So we had initially, the reason why we started this project was mainly driven from BUSD, which is the Binance USD stablecoin. We wanted to bring a USD backed stablecoin on top of our platforms to be able to provide broader stablecoin asset. And that was kind of the seed idea. And then we felt that maybe we could not just focus on that and could have a more generic solution that would allow anyone to be able to convert any asset, not just on Ethereum, but even potentially on Bitcoin if you wanted to be brought to Zilliqa and be able to use that asset at a cheaper rate.
Awesome. I love it. I'm a really big fan of the ideas of interoperability and cross-chain and communication between blockchains and making things as smooth as possible for the user experience. I think it's a really important thing for us to get to that mainstream adoption point. Well, Amrit, I've really truly enjoyed this conversation. Before we do wrap things up, was there anything else you wanted to touch on or any final thoughts you wanted to leave people with?
Well, so I'd just like to mention that for those who are new to Zilliqa, check out our website. We are very active on Telegram, and me and many of our personal team members are very active on Telegram. Feel free to come and join our community. And if you have Zills, or if you don't have Zills, get them, and then you can stake on our platform and earn some returns. So don't be shy.
Awesome. Well, we'll definitely have to do this again, and I will include links down below for the Telegram site as well. So as soon as we're done, I'll make sure I get all those links provided so people can get that information. And also, in case you don't see at the bottom of the screen, I am going to select 2 random subscribers who comment in the comment section your Zill address, your Zilliqa address, ZIL, post up your address, and 2 random winners will win 500 Zill each. So Amrit, I'm going to go ahead and close things out. If you can just bear with me one moment, I'll be right back with you.
Sure. Thank you very much, Chris. It was lovely chatting here.
Thank you so much, man. So ladies and gentlemen, I really do appreciate you guys tuning in. I really appreciate you guys being in this live stream and participating in the conversation there. Sorry, I wasn't really paying attention to the live chat. I was trying to make sure I was paying attention to Amrit and what we were talking about in regards to Zilliqa. So I hope you guys are excited. Again, I'm going to have links down below. Make sure you're following me on LBRY and Odyssey, my sister channels where I post up extra content. Check out my Patreon channel where I post up exclusive content, early access to videos, monthly giveaways for patrons only. And most importantly, it's a way to support the channel directly. Check out my audio podcast, Rice Radio, hosted on anchor.fm. It's available on every major podcasting platform. And today I dropped that exclusive episode with Jeremy Corden from Goldback Incorporated. I want to go ahead and go to a quick little thumbnail here and remind you that you can get that ½ ounce of silver. First-time buyers at Money Metals Exchange, go to moneymetals.com. You purchase $100 or more, and you use the promo code RICE, RICE. You get a free ½ ounce of silver, and it's an additional way to support the channel as well. Thank you again for tuning in. If you're not subscribed, make sure you are subscribed. Hit that notification bell so you can stay up to date with my videos as they come out. And as always, I encourage you to be the change by practicing change, and I love you all.